Welcome back to Blake's Craft Beer Podcast. My name is Blake Longfellow. I got my buddy back. Last time we talked a little quarter last year, but I'm happy to have you back on. Please introduce yourself and what you do on Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah.
And he's also a book writer, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Joel Geyer. For a long time, I've been known as Brewery Travels on Instagram and Twitter. Traveling to breweries. I've been to almost 1,500 breweries across all 50 states. Wrote a book about it called Flights Across America that came out in December of 2024. So already been almost a year and a half since that came about. I'm currently back home in Wisconsin. We were, living the travel life, and now that both kids are in school, we're back home in Wisconsin more permanently. And I've actually been working on a new project, a new news conglomerate called Badger Beer Report, where we cover the Wisconsin craft beer scene inside and out, pretty much constantly. It's been a lot of fun to work on that project. But talking about traveling to breweries, visiting breweries is still something that I'm very passionate about.
So tell me how your book's going along.
Good. That first 8-9 months ago, I did a lot of events. I think I did book signings in was it 7 states maybe, in different places, and had a lot of fun. Got to meet up with a lot of folks around the country that have been following me throughout my journey. So that was a lot of fun, getting to go back to some of these breweries that I was able to visit. And I know that the book was also bought by people in all stretches of all around the country. So getting to share my travels and my knowledge with people about these breweries and about the brewery scene around the country was something that I was really excited about doing, because this was a passion project of mine, and I've enjoyed doing it. And you can still find the book pretty much anywhere on Amazon. I know there's other places online that you can as well. But yeah, Flights Across America, A Brewery Lover's Journey was the full name of the book. And yeah, just kind of my ode and love letter to breweries around the country.
Has anyone shocked you how far the book has gone so far?
I know that somebody in Europe has bought it because they like to travel in the U.S. And I know that it's been used for trips in Alaska and Hawaii, because I obviously talk about breweries in all 50 states. So I know that a lot of people, that's been the most rewarding thing, is that I still have people. Just recently, a couple weeks ago, I had someone here in Milwaukee that I know well that they talked about, they were reading the chapter on Seattle because they were flying up to Seattle to go do an Alaskan cruise. And so they were going to be in Seattle for a few nights, and they used it to try to get some intel on some of the neighborhoods there. And it's just fun for me that it's continuing to, I don't know, have an impact is seems like a strong word, but people are enjoying it and they're garnering the information that they need from it, because it is a book that you can, obviously read the whole thing and sit down cover to cover if you want to, but it's also a book that you can pick and choose. Like if you are going to Miami, you can look through the Miami section. Then if you're going to Houston or Austin, Texas another week, you can look through that. So it's kind of a fun book in that manner that, it's not a typical one-size-fits-all book that you can just have to read a certain way. You can kind of go throughout it however you please.
And you said 1,500 breweries?
Yeah, well, I'm at 1,469 right now. So
that is insane.
Haven't been to quite as many here so far in 2026. Having the 2 kiddos in school has slowed the process down on that. I did just get to a handful down in Peoria, and I'm actually going to be going out to San Jose here later this month, so I'll get some more new ones then. But yeah, and since the book came out, I've also been to some of the big misses like Houston and Detroit. I went to this past year. Detroit was a really big surprise for me. Some really great breweries and great newer breweries there in Detroit. So it's still fun for me to go out and find these places And a lot of these new breweries are making great beer. We had there were 3 breweries that opened up here in Wisconsin in particular that are already making some cream of the crop beer that I've been very impressed with. So it's been fun to follow along with those. And, like I said, I've been more focused and honed in on the Wisconsin craft beer scene since I'm now, more permanently at home. But I still do try to keep tabs on everything around the state, or not around the state, around the country, following things like the World Beer Cup Awards. And it's always fun for me to go through those and see what breweries that win awards that I've been able to been to, and what breweries maybe jump out at me as I've won a whole bunch and that I haven't been to and that I need to add to my list. So, that's all part of the fun.
So do you have a certain countdown when you get close to 1,500? Do you have a brewery in mind, or is it just as the flow goes?
Yeah, I mean it kind of is. It's partially how the flow goes, because obviously I get to a point, especially now, where I have more, I'm not going to them as rapidly. Like when we were traveling full time and I was coming up, it was dependent on where we were going to be living, because we were bouncing around so much. Like when I was hitting my 1,000th, I knew that we were going to be in Denver, so obviously I had a lot of pick, and I chose Bierstadt Lager House, and a lot of my other milestones I tried to pick something for one reason or another, but it just kind of depends. So yeah, I will. I can't say at the moment that I have this dream brewery that, I mean, obviously I do have it. I obviously have dream breweries. I would love to make it happen, but I also know that I can't just buy a plane ticket around the country for this, one little thing. So it is a kind of play it by ear, but once I get, down to 10 or 12 away, I can start to kind of crunch some numbers and math and see if there's anything within striking distance, within a weekend trip that we could go see, or, if something new is popping up around here that I'm excited about. But, the whole chasing the numbers thing for me also was really important for me when we were traveling. It was. I loved hitting all these milestones. And I feel like now the last year or so, and I think partially because I'm not going to as many, my pace is not the same as it once was. I'm trying to slow down and just appreciate the visits that I do have more so than just trying to chase the next number in the next brewery. Which I'm always wanting to get to new breweries. That's never something that's going to change. But I am trying to appreciate the breweries that I do get to, no matter what the circumstances are, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So when you do these big trips, I'm assuming you do more than one. How many do you normally try to hit in a day? Are you normally doing flights, or how do you handle it in a day?
Yeah, so when I visit a brewery for the first time, I get a flight. It obviously not every brewery offers them, but when they are available, that's what I do. And I like to get a variety of beers typically. And if I'm going into a brewery without any knowledge, the baseline is getting something light, something hoppy, something dark, and a wild card. Now, when going into a brewery, and I talk about this in the book, I do try to always ask a brewery, if I have not done research ahead of time, but sometimes I've been able to do that. But if I have not done the research, I always try to ask what your flagships are. What is a beer that you guys are best known for, or at least styles? Because you go to some breweries, and it's not as common nowadays as it was 5-10 years ago, where you would go in and there were breweries that have half the tap list IPAs, or whatever the case may be. But you always want to make sure that if there is a beer that a brewery is known for, I've been to breweries where their flagship was an Imperial Red Ale, or a Belgian Double, and that may not be a style that you necessarily always think to grab in your flight, but if it's the beer the brewery is known for, you should oftentimes get it, because that's what they're known for. It's probably, one of the better beers there. So yeah, I always try to get a flight, and if I can't, then I normally would get a half pour, a couple half pours or something. And that's for the first visit. Normally, if I ever return to a place, I'm not doing that. And if I'm returning, I'm ordering based off of what I truly want to drink at that moment, rather than trying to get the best picture of a brewery, because that's what the flight is for me. I talk about the pros and cons of flights in my book, because there are definitely cons, because only drinking 4 ounces is very different than drinking a full pint of a beer in terms of how you experience it. But for me, I always wanted to get for my purposes, I felt I got a better picture of the brewery if I was able to sample 4 beers or 5 or 6, whatever was on this flight, and see what they were creating across a variety of different styles. Trying to include a flagship or 2, but because then you would sometimes go into places, and if you go into a place and they've got 4 sours, I need to make sure that I get at least 1 sour, because if they have that many, that's probably a big part of what they do. So that's one reason that I like to do the flights, is that you go into a brewery and if there's 18 beers on tap, even just picking 4 is hardly doing it justice. Whereas if you're only picking 1, it's even more so, where you're really limiting yourself to finding out what the brewery can all provide.
Yeah. Do you find new breweries are hard to find, or is it just new areas you go to?
Yeah, I mean, currently where we live now, I have to drive well over an hour, probably about an hour and a half to get to anything new. Have to go down towards like the Chicago area for the most part. But that's why, like I said, we went on a little trip to Peoria recently, and I got to go to a few there. We have to fly up to San Jose for something else and be able to get to a few there. And like I said, it does become trickier. Obviously, the more breweries you go to, and the bigger you kind of expand locally, all of a sudden you have to go further and further away to get to something new. But there are a handful of breweries that are going to be coming along here in the next couple months here locally, so I'm excited about that. And I know that this summer, I'm sure we'll be taking some extra trips both around the state of Wisconsin as well as here on the Midwest. And I have family that lives up close to the Twin Cities and down in Iowa, and so occasionally there's something new there as well that I'm able to get to. But yeah, like I said, I mean, part of it is also not just discovering new breweries, but discovering new beers at breweries that I already know and love. So yeah, that's all part of the journey, I suppose.
Because in July, a buddy of mine, we do these coaster trips, and we're going to Great America. And it's my first time up in Chicago, so we're spending one day at the park, and the next couple of days it's nothing but breweries.
Yeah.
So what's your recommendations in Chicago?
In Chicago?
Or how should I handle it? Because I know there's a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, Chicago, there's a lot of really good breweries there. I would say, are you a lager guy?
I'm getting more into lagers, but I do like my IPAs as well.
Yeah. Well, I would say, though, for lagers, Dovetail is one of the best lager breweries in the country. They make amazing beers. I would say I'm a really big fan of Off Color. They don't really do IPA stuff, but they do a lot of fun, funkier stuff, too, and I love the guys there. Off Color's great. I would check out Maplewood for sure. That's a really good spot. And Half Acre is kind of one of the OG names there. You talk about, and they're one that, in terms of IPAs, that you would certainly find some things that you would enjoy. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of really good breweries there in the Chicagoland area, and I would say for the most part, they're not for how big Chicago is. There's a lot of them that aren't like too spread out. That if you're spending the day going to breweries, you shouldn't have too much problems, getting to quite a few of them. You obviously don't want to go from like the northern suburbs down to like south of the city or anything constant, but there's enough around there, that can certainly keep you busy. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, what else would be a good, because like I said, Half Acre would be...
If I had more time, because I didn't realize how close Great America was to Wisconsin, but that's going to be another day.
Yeah, it is. But because that's when, like I said, like that's really, Chicago isn't really that crazy far from me. But yeah, I mean, because I would say if you check out Maplewood and Half Acre, those would be 2 good starting places for what you'd be looking for. Hot Butcher for the World, that's the one I was thinking of for IPAs. That's the one that you'll definitely want to check out for IPAs also. Hot Butcher for the World, they do really excellent work. I think the 1 year right before I wrote my book in 2024, one of their IPAs won my annual award for best IPA. So that would be one that I would highly recommend for you too.
And you were talking, so how would you describe Wisconsin's beer scene?
Wisconsin's beer scene. Well, obviously Wisconsin has a very historic beer scene, and one could argue that Wisconsin has the most historic beer scene of any state in the country in many ways. You know, Milwaukee in particular, of course, is well known. I mean, our baseball team name is the Brewers, and we have so many of the biggest names in brewing history that still have all their buildings here in the city. But not only that, we have 2 of the 5 oldest breweries in the country, period. Or 3 of the 5, I think. Stevens Point, Potosi, and Minhas, that were all in like before the 1860s were all created. I think 1845 was the oldest one. So Wisconsin has a very historic beer scene, but it also is a beer scene that does have, obviously, all of the modern showcase of current craft beer. Obviously, the greater Milwaukee area is the hub. It's where the most breweries are. It's where a majority of the highest quality breweries are, I would say. But there are a lot of other places around the state too. You know, Madison area has got a really great beer scene. The Appleton, Fox River Valley area leading up to Green Bay has really started to grow fast. Appleton has gotten a ton of great breweries up there now all of a sudden. And Wisconsin also, though, is known for a lot of their rural breweries. I mean, the biggest, most well-known brewery of the state is in a small town in the middle of nowhere, New Glarus. That, you know, I think it's a top 15 largest brewery in the country, but it doesn't distribute outside of the state of Wisconsin. And I think that speaks a lot to Wisconsinites' pride in their beer and how much they love their brands of beer. Because obviously people come from neighboring states. Like, you talk about like Chicago and how close it is to Iowa, or close it is to Wisconsin. I know a lot of people that in that northern Illinois area that will drive up to get across the border so they can buy New Glarus beer. The second you cross the border, you stop at any gas station in Wisconsin, and you can find a cornucopia of different New Glarus beer options. Obviously, Spotted Cow is the famous one, but that's not even like one of their 10 best beers. They make so many great beers, and Spotted Cow is just essentially the cash cow that allows them to make everything else. But yeah, so I mean, there is definitely a lot of pride in the beer that is made here in Wisconsin. We have seen, obviously, it's not 2015 anymore where you see the exponential growth. But unlike a lot of areas, I feel like Wisconsin's growth is still right there. You know, in terms of openings versus closures, we're pretty even. And most of the have not been breweries that were making that upper echelon beer. There's really only been 1 or 2 examples, and they had outside extenuating circumstances that did not deal with the beer or the brewery that caused them to close. But overall, I feel like the ones that we're also bringing in, like in particular in 2025, some of them are just making phenomenal beer. Badger Beer Report, we actually did a collaboration where we had 9 breweries that opened up in 2025 around the state, and we brought them all together to brew a beer. It was then released at all 9 breweries this spring. So it's been fun to work with them and see kind of these new breweries emerging and becoming part of this craft beer sector that many people are in the doom and gloom phase, and they think that craft beer is, you know, starting to slide down and the bubble is quote unquote bursting. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's a market that is maturing and that it is causing breweries that are going to need to shift, and you have to be good at what you're doing. It's just like any other business. You no longer can be 2 college roommates that threw together a homebrew kit once and now think you can go open up a brewery in an industrial neighborhood. That worked in, you know, 2014, 2016, but in 2026, that's no longer really the case. So I think that's what you're seeing is that it's not so much that craft beer is declining, it's that it's matured, and we are now reaching kind of a new era of craft beer where, you know, early on craft beer was hard to find. There was only very few breweries that, you know, you saw, like you had the Sierra Nevadas and you had the Boston Beer Company, and then you had like the small brew pubs, you know, occasionally in places. and then you saw kind of a couple different runs of upticks of rapid growth, and now you've reached a point where there's a lot of breweries, and I think there still is room for growth in a lot of areas, because I think one of the big next step for breweries is that they're realizing that you cannot just become a regional powerhouse overnight. Like the days of, one example of one of the last breweries to really do it was from Ohio, and that was Rheingeist. That was a brewery that went from small to big very rapidly, and you don't see that happen very much anymore, because the way for success for many breweries now is finding a neighborhood or being part of a community where you are the brewery. And that's what breweries were before Prohibition too, is that there were breweries in all the different small towns and in different neighborhoods, and it was kind of like a local neighboring watering hole. So that's where I see it going more so, is that you have to, as a brewery, become part of that neighborhood or that community. Because a lot of these communities, there are so many communities out there that don't have a brewery that could support one if one was there. It's just a matter of, someone coming along that wants to take on that initiative and has the ability to do it properly.
Right. Because I say all the time, the days of a brewery opening, their stuff's not 100% yet. I'll give it another try. A lot of those people are gone. When you open a brewery, people just don't have the patience anymore, and they say, I'll give them a cup. Even though I will still do it, but there's a lot of people out there, you only got one chance.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's one reason that, it's hard out there with breweries, but like that's why one thing that I've always talked with brewers about too, and I've talked to people, is that I know brewers that, one topic always that you hear about is when brewers dump beer, when a batch isn't quite perfect. And there are brewers that don't do that. And that's just one of many examples of something that you can do to shoot yourself in the foot, because as you said, there's a lot of people that will try your beer for the first time. And if it's one of those beers that didn't turn out right and you still served it, they're going to think that your beer isn't very good, and they're not going to even bother giving you another chance. Unfortunately, some of it's out of their control, because, you see distributors where beer sits on shelves forever, and then people that are not aware of, date codes and shelf life on beer, they're not getting the full appreciation for that beer. One story I always like to tell is that when I was in college, my first experience with Two Hearted was in a mixed six-pack. And looking back, I know that Two Hearted, which is one of the, iconic beers of America, of craft beer, it was definitely had been sitting there for God knows how long, probably over a year, and it was skunky as hell. But I didn't understand that at the time. I was beer. And so for many years, I thought Two Hearted was a trash beer. And so that's just one of those things that, is out of their control, unfortunately. But, that's part of the game, I guess.
Because when I go into a beer store and I see a clearance, I will steer straight away from it.
Yeah.
Because I'm worried how long that beer has actually been sitting.
Well, and so much of it also is that, there's certain stores that I prefer to go to over others just because the beer is all making sure that it's refrigerated. Because that's the other thing that just drastically affects the beers, is that if the beer's been sitting in the refrigerator for 3 months, that's way different than if it's been sitting on a room temperature shelf for 3 months, in terms of how the beer is settling, and especially depending on the style. So full agreement here from me.
I mean, for breweries now, it's just not about how many podcasts I've had. It's not about just the beer anymore. I mean, they have to be a full restaurant, entertainment, events. I mean, it's just not about beer anymore.
No, absolutely. And you see this in terms of the diversification also of, you talk about the other experiences in the tap room, but it's not even just that. It's about what you're getting in your glass. You're seeing more and more breweries in the last 5 years that make their own seltzers and that make their own THC drinks. And I see breweries working with, I've seen a handful of breweries that have started adding distilling as part of their, business. So you see them essentially trying to bring in a wider array of possible patrons by offering this variety of beverages that, 10, 15 years ago, a brewery would have scoffed at the idea of making having an entire line dedicated to seltzers and another line dedicated to THC drinks. But that's become not even like here and there. It's become fairly common practice that, I mean, if you're in a big city, there's going to be a decent amount of breweries that are producing those types of beverages for sure. So, I mean, they are looking for different ways to bring people in. And you talk about food is a big factor. Like in some of these new breweries that I was talking about, the best ones that opened up all also have food. And that helps keep people there. Because again, breweries, it's not just about how do you get people into the tap room, it's how do you get them to stay in the tap room. And, food, events, activities in the tap room, all that can play, into the puzzle pieces coming together to craft an experience that will not only, have people sitting there longer, but will then bring them back, times again after that.
Because for at least in Ohio, the food trucks was the big thing in the 15, 16, 17s, 18s.
Yeah.
All the way up to COVID. And COVID kind of moved them, starting to go, oh gosh, so what do I need to do to bring more money? I know we could do carry out food and stuff like that. But a lot of times there's food trucks also. I know there's a lot of good food trucks, but there were others that I heard from brewers say they had a flat tire or something came up or they leave and all of a sudden the brewery's up without food. And sometimes, like in the Dayton area, there's a lot of strip mall breweries, so there's like a lot of restaurants connected to them, but not everyone has that. Oh, there's a restaurant, I can just go and grab it,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it has certainly been a change. And when you talk about food, that's the one thing I always talk about too, is that my wife doesn't like beer, but she sure likes the food at breweries. It's rare to find a brewery that makes their own food where the food is not excellent. I obviously don't eat at every brewery I visit. That would just be insanity. But many times I have been able to enjoy the food that breweries offer for sure.
Because one of my favorite beer foods at breweries are cheese curds. I bet Wisconsin has a lot of them. I would assume.
Yeah, there's one of the breweries here in particular, Lakefront, is well known. They have besides they've won awards for their cheese curds, but they also do crazy concoctions of cheese curds each month where they have a specialty cheese curd option where like sometimes I know they've done like cinnamon roll themed cheese curds. They've done fruity pebble crusted covered cheese curds, chocolate dip cheese. Like they do all sorts of crazy stuff with their cheese curds up here. That's for sure.
The breweries also taught me what smash burgers were.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they did because they're just so good. If you look in different areas in like the United States, because you travel everywhere, what's some big things that stand out to you, like in different cities or regions? Is like say different beer habits, different beer styles. What do you notice when you travel?
Yeah, I would say one thing I've noticed is that there certainly is still, there will always, because when you think of, regions, like what styles are they known for? And I would say that outlook has been diminished somewhat. I would say that most styles are, like, it used to be like, for instance, West Coast IPAs, like those were all California, and you occasionally saw them other places. Or hazy New England IPAs, those all started in New England, and then they slowly started to make their way. And at this point, like those types of styles you see everywhere. You see West Coast IPAs. Some of the best West Coast IPAs I've had have been on the East Coast, and likewise New England IPAs being on the West Coast. I remember when we were living in California and seeing the New England hazy IPA craze starting to hit there, and what kind of the locals were talking about with it. And it's not that there are not any like regional styles. Like for instance, Alaska had way more barley wines per capita when you're.
So you're telling me I need to go to Alaska?
Yeah, that's one example. There are certainly different areas, and like for instance, obviously a lot of breweries do fresh hop IPAs. When the hop season comes around, but a place like the state of Washington does it way more and way better than anybody else. because that's where so many of the hop yards are and hop farms. So they're able to do it at a much greater scale, and a higher percentage of the breweries do it because it is, not as it's not as costly to them because they can just be there in person and do it. But yeah, I mean, my biggest takeaway also is always that there are still levels to craft beer scenes when you're looking at it like from a city perspective, like when you're comparing cities or states. Obviously, there are states, like Colorado, Oregon, California, that are, in that crazy upper echelon, and you have states like, Wyoming and North Dakota or, Mississippi that do not have that same strong craft beer scene. But what I have found in my travels is that you can find good craft beer pretty much everywhere. There are, like I said, you're not just going to, showing up to a place like Jacksonville and expecting it to be on the same level as Denver isn't fair. But I was in Jacksonville and I found really good beer there. And you just have to go to these different breweries, and not think like you have to just go in, order the beers that, they are best known for, look for the styles you want, and you'll be able to enjoy it. Like I said, I've been to all these small cities, big cities, rural places. There's good craft breweries out there in every stretch of the country. At this point, you can find good craft beer, and that's one of the blessings of this craft beer boom. Is that there still are gaps. There are still gaps, where there is not many breweries, but for the most part, every major city around the country has some form of a craft beer scene.
So you think it's good and bad, but what do you think about different regions not having distinct beer because you're saying everything's moving in ways? Is that a good thing, or do you like going to certain areas like, hey, this is like?
I would say that what it has now become is that people aren't traveling looking for a style, but they're traveling looking for a specific brewery. I mentioned like Wisconsin, it's like a pilgrimage to, have New Glarus in Wisconsin. And, a place like Jester King in Texas, or going to Sierra Nevada in either California or out in Nashville, North Carolina. People are going for craft beer. They're either going for the city scene overall, like going to a Denver or going to San Diego and going to these neighborhoods like North Park in San Diego, Rhino in Denver, Ballard in Seattle, or they're going for these specific big name breweries that's why they're visiting them, or for even specific beers, thinking about, Hetty Topper at the Alchemist, or going to Russian River, for their beers. Like it depends.
Oh, trust me, Russian River's is a bucket list.
Yeah. So I think that's definitely part of it. Is that it is fun. Like when you go somewhere, like I said, and if there's a style that is really big, like I said, when hazies were first really taken off and we were living in New England, like that, like it's really cool to have that regionality, but it's also fun when these styles become more national, because then you have more breweries trying their hand at it, which means that, new ways of doing it are discovered. There's high quality breweries in other parts of the country that are trying it. So there's more high quality options of that style. It becomes more readily available, because if you liked West Coast IPAs and those kind of went away and you weren't living in California, you were living in South Carolina, for a long time, you didn't really have many options for that, and now there are. One of the best West Coast IPAs that I've had was from Revelry, which is in Charleston, South Carolina. So I think that it is fun to have the regionality styles, but at the same time, I think that many people are finding when they're traveling, they're going for the city or the brewery or a specific beer more so than a style.
Because when I did my Christian trip last year, I started through the Carolinas, and honestly, we didn't have a lot of time in Nashville, but we definitely stopped through. Like one of my bucket list last year was Burial, and it absolutely hit everything everyone was saying. Because sometimes I'm not calling anyone out when I say this. Sometimes you hear say, "Oh, you gotta go try this brewery," and it's like, it's kind of a miss. maybe it was just a bad day on their part, like I said, but Burial was awesome. I really need to get back. We did try Wicked Weed. That was kind of hitting a little miss there, but maybe just the styles we were doing. Don't judge me for going there, but
Yeah. I mean, and that is part of it. No matter what, when you're visiting a brewery, you only get one shot at it. So, especially I know a place like Wicked Weed got so many beers that, I was a big fan of their sours when I was there. We loved Asheville was one of the places that we lived during our travels, and so I have very much a soft spot in my heart for that city.
And you were talking about different states, and I just feel like, obviously, us in Ohio we might be biased, but I really feel like Ohio really holds its own when it comes to the craft beer scene. Just with not only the amount of breweries, but when you see the U.S. Open or the U.S. Beer Open or JBF, like, there's a lot of Ohio on that list, and I definitely feel very good about that.
Yeah, 100%. Ohio definitely does have a very strong beer scene. I love Cincinnati. I'm a big fan of the beer scene in Cincinnati. I've enjoyed breweries in Youngstown, Toledo, Cleveland, Dayton, and there's also a lot of really great breweries kind of just scattered throughout the state too. Ohio really does have a strong craft beer scene. That is for certain. I can back you up on that one for sure, Blake.
Yes, and like a couple years ago, I went to Michigan to like the New Holland area and Kalamazoo, and it's like, and I never made it to Grand Rapids, and I was like, crap, because that was a goal of mine, but because Michigan has a huge one as well.
Yeah.
So I think the Midwest really gets overshadowed.
Oh, 100%.
Sometimes from the East and West Coast.
I mean, as it is with many things. I mean, beer is no different. I do think that pretty much, I mean, especially the upper Midwest states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana doesn't quite up there, I would say, with them, but they are, Indianapolis does have a pretty good beer scene. And even Iowa, compared to its population, Iowa does have a good beer scene as well. I spent a lot of time there. But yeah, Midwest definitely does get overlooked, partially because they do not boast, the same craft beer numbers and history necessarily when you compare it to a Oregon, a Colorado, a California. But I think they're right up there with the best of them. I mean, so many of the cities around the Midwest are just really cranking out great beer.
So let's talk about beer a little bit. So what are some styles you're really liking right now, and some that kind of have you scratch your heads from time to time?
Yeah, I would say my favorites are definitely Czech lagers. I would say Czech Pale, followed closely by Czech Dark. Czech Ambers are a little bit further down. I would say the Czech Pale is like my go-to. I love that style. I love the different types of pours you can do with the side pull faucets when it comes to Czech lagers, because letting the foam speak is something that you can really, really do with these Czech lagers, especially the pale ones. And I mean, I love Kolsch. I still enjoy a really good Goza Berliner Weiss. So yeah, I mean, I'm primarily, especially at home, I love lagers. I used to say Helles was my favorite, and that's still up there. But yeah, Czech lagers are definitely my top pick right now. In terms of styles, I don't really go to. I'm just not a big bourbon barrel aged guy, and I know that that's like such a big thing for like a lot of folks. But I used to drink more hard liquors when I was like in college, and now the taste of bourbon just does not. I just do not like the taste or really the smell. And so when it's in a beer and it's prevalent, it's just not for me. And I also just tend to shy away from high ABV stuff. It's just, there's certainly a time and a place for it, but I'm not a big, double-digit ABV guy. I'd rather sit there and drink my like I said, my lighter style lagers, maybe a nice pale ale, something along those lines that has the complexity while also being a little bit lighter bodied. So that way I'm, especially as we warm up, being able to sit there and drink a few beers with buddies, and that's just been where I'm currently at least.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me being near like Cincinnati, Brewery, just kind of heavy around like you when you talk to a lot of different ones in Cincinnati and Dayton. So I
Yeah.
kind of have a love for them, but all it's doing. But recently some of the new breweries that you might have talked to on the show, like recently just opened up the last 2 years, they're doing nothing but like the European style, like 6% is as high as they go on their boards, which is a very interesting trend. I don't know how you this. I don't know if that's a trend we're gonna keep seeing, or very interested to see where this goes.
Sessionable beers have become more in vogue in the last couple of years, which I love to see. But because I've even seen there's a brewery here in Wisconsin that came out with like I forget what they classify them because it's like lighter sessionable styles, but they use a different word, and they're below 3%, but they're like based off of their hazy IPA and like their one of their lagers, but they're like super light ABV. So I do think that there is a market for those, just like that. You see markets for gluten-free beers growing and non-alcoholic beers growing. That was another thing talking about breweries diversifying. I've seen a number of breweries coming out with NA versions of their beers, both for in the tap room and in cans as well. So that's another pathway that you've seen breweries starting to kind of spread their wings to try to attract more people.
Because the episode when we're talking today, I released the Fabled episode, and they had called a session mead. It was only like 5 or 6% of their normal mead. It was really good, but it was because mead's another questionable thing. Because a lot of times you're talking about your heavy beers. Normally you see mead, it's like 14, 15. But this was like a 5% or 6% mead, and it was awesome. Absolutely, it was like it's something I could keep drinking.
100%.
So anything new with you were talking about? Let's talk about this project you've been working on for Wisconsin and where that is heading.
Yeah, so I joined it. It's now been over 2 years where it was just called Badger Beer Hour, and we just did a monthly show kind of covering the Wisconsin craft beer scene. And then last year we started to shift it. Me and one of the guys in particular really kind of took it upon ourselves. Excuse me. To transition it to something even more than that. And that's now Badger Beer Report. And we are kind of a growing news entity where we do live stream shows multiple times a month. We do a variety of different podcasts. We do video content. We do a Patreon where we do specialized videos. I have a weekly newsletter that I produce that covers the state of Wisconsin beer scene with news articles, Q's and A's, covering beer releases and events all throughout the state. We go and we cover a lot of the festivals around the state. We're doing a lot more collaboration beers with different breweries around the state to promote the state of Wisconsin. So yeah, it's really a project that we're passionate about the craft beer scene in Wisconsin. We're doing what we can to promote these breweries, helping them to flourish in any way we can. And yeah, it's something that I've enjoyed doing. And doing it's fun doing interviews with people in the industry, and also kind of doing our own takes on coverage of different topics. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's been something that is continuing to grow, and we're hoping that this may even be able to become a small, like, kind of actual real job here in the not too distant future.
And do you ever see you writing another book, or is one book good?
We'll see. I don't want to say never say never. I wouldn't say never say never. Like it's something that is possibly out there. It's a very big endeavor of cost, but it's a big endeavor, of course, in terms of time, money, all of it. But it is still really cool to have my own book out there. Maybe someday I'll post an updated version of the book, a second edition of some kind. And we've actually talked about doing some type of book on the history of Wisconsin craft beer or something. But for now, I'm very happy and content and proud of the book that I did write, and I'm enjoying kind of this next chapter of my own craft beer journey.
I'm excited to see where it heads for you. Thank you for your time today, and I hope to have you back on again in the future.
Absolutely, Blake. Thanks for having me on. It was great getting to talk to you again.
All right. Cheers.